White Eagle Defiant, Poland 1939. This is a game, as the subtitle tells us, which is about the invasion of Poland in 1939. It is a two-player war game. One player will control Polish forces, the other player will control German and most likely Soviet forces. There's a check late in the game that tells you if Soviet forces are also gonna be added to the slaughter here. It is a game that is for two players, but it can be played solitaire by a single player controlling both sides at the best of their possibilities. This works because the game has no secret information, has randomness provided by die rolls that resolve combat, and also you have a cheat pool activation system. And if you know my video reviews, if you know anything about my taste in war games, you know that I like this mechanism very much. Here's pretty simple and straightforward. You will have a number of activation cheats that are placed in an opaque container. 4 of these are end turn cheats when all 4 have been drawn from the cup. So you have the sense of like mounting dread. Oh my god, it's almost the end of the turn. Unless that's exactly, yes, it's almost the end of the turn. So when those 4 chits have been drawn, the turn is over, which means not every other chit may come out every turn. Then you have chits representing different groups of the parties involved. So you may have, say, the German North group, the Polish South group. Again, later in the game, you also have 2 activation chits that may come starting from the end of turn 5 and may be added to the mix. And so when you have an activation chit that is drawn, then you activate all units belonging to that group. And then you have event chits that don't trigger right away, but will give different advantages to the player that the chit belongs to. So it's drawn, it's placed in an area on the board for pull chits, and then when the situation qualifies, then you can choose to activate a chit of your side that was just drawn, and the back of the event chits also have a reminder of what the chit does. And these event chits can be used once per turn. Also, if a turn is supposed to end before the German player has used all of their, has been able to activate all of their German units, then the player can try to push things forward. You roll a die and there's a 50% chances that everything goes well. You do get to activate your remaining units without any problem, but there's also a chance that you will activate them with a penalty and you will move a space up on the Blitzkrieg breakdown chart or track. If you go to space 5 as the anti-Polish party, then you win the game. The cost to your beautiful Blitzkrieg machine was just too high. So this is an idea. Otherwise, what happens here? Well, the German Soviet player is trying to take control of key locations on the board. You see these boxes that have a red border around them. These are victory locations. Every time the German Soviet player takes control of one of those locations, you remove a cylinder from this area of the board here and you place it in the corresponding box to indicate that you have control. The number that you see there that is visible, the rightmost number on this section of the board, is the number of victory points that the German Soviet player is currently scoring. So the more cities you take control of, the higher the score. If the Polish player takes control of those again, then you put them there, you put them back. It's a nice, interesting way of keeping track of points, very intuitive. It also means that sometimes your units will be sitting on top of these of these cylinders here, but still not a problem. And also that area that you saw up there also has a reminder of different effects that are triggered based on the score. For example, if the score is very low, then other allies are harassing the Germans in areas outside of the map, so there's a penalty for the Germans. Again, if there is a certain number of German control markers on the board, so the Germans are scoring a good amount of points, then the Soviets decide to join the party. Isn't that convenient for them? Anyhow, units are divided into groups identified by the color of their NATO symbol, and that again is what links them to specific activation chits. The movement value of the units is not indicated, but it's easy to remember because infantry units have a movement value of 2 movement points. Everybody else moves by 4 movement points per activation. Units usually roll a single die in combat, as indicated on these 2 units, for example. And the number you see there is the number to hit. When a unit rolls a die in combat, if it rolls that number or higher, it scores a hit. Some units have special abilities in combat. So, for example, some tank units have 2 dice indicated there, which means precisely that they roll 2 dice. However, suppose that's what I rolled, it'll look like it's 2 hits, 5 and a 6, they're both higher than 4. However, what it means is that a tank unit rolls 2 dice in combat, but it still scores a single hit. So the 2 dice simply give you better chances of scoring a single hit. You do score 2 hits when you roll 2 dice only if both results are hits and you roll a double, the same number. In this case specifically, then that tank has scored 2 hits against the opponent. Units have a number of steps, usually it's 2 steps. You take a hit, you flip the unit to its reduced side, which may have a worse combat value. Another hit on a reduced unit will eliminate the unit. The Polish have some cavalry units, as indicated by the nice little horse head there. And these units are particularly interesting because they get to roll in combat before the opponent does. So, with the exception of Polish cavalry, all units in combat roll simultaneously and apply hits simultaneously. Again, with the exception of these fine folks here. They roll first, they apply the hits to the opponent first, and then whoever is left in the opponent's forces fires against them. And whoever is left in their forces also fires against the opponent at the same time. Another type of unit is forts. As you can see, some cities on the map have 2 boxes. The main box that every city has is where the main combat units go. But then the units, the ones that have also secondary box, they represent forts. And fort units look like this. Of course, you're gonna place them in boxes with the number of the unit there. And just a reminder that the fort gives an additional number of dice to the defender that is controlling the fort and defends there. Also, in order for you to damage a fort, you need to eliminate all units that are in the main box of that location. A fort takes a hit, you reduce it, it also loses a number of dice. And then a second hit removes the fort. Once you have these things, more or less you know how to play the game. Players will draw chits from the cup, and again, there may be an event that doesn't do anything for now. It may be a group that activates. Units that activate will move from location to location following these connections up to the full movement allowance, stopping when they enter an area that contains units of the opponent. These connections here are worth cost 1 movement point. Some broken dotted connections cost 2 movement points. And then after the active group has completed their movements, you will resolve combat in all locations that have units of both sides. Then you move them here to this area, so you can spread them out, divide them by combat values, and then again you roll dice. Usually 1 die per unit, with the exception again of forts and tanks. They will roll 2. Everything simultaneous with the exception of Polish cavalry, so you determine number of hits that each side suffers, you apply those hits, and then the side that suffered the most hits has to retreat. Also allows, those cavalry units are awesome, but they're also very brittle because you only have one side. They only take 1 hit before they disappear in a blaze of glory. So this is basically the idea. When you activate a group, you also have the option of putting 1 unit of the group into recovery, like you can flip a reduced unit back to its former glory. But this is the general idea. I'll activate units randomly because of the activation chits, occasionally trigger events, fight around the map, try to summon the Soviets. If you're the German player, try to keep the Soviets out of the confrontation. This line here, if the Soviets arrive, the Germans have to get the heck out of there, otherwise you get a penalty. This is where the Soviets want to take control of stuff. And so, continue like this until the end of the game. And the end of the game may change based on what happens, but the general idea is still the control of locations on the map is going to be what generates victory points. And so, depending on what happens there, on how well the Polish player was able to defend, how well the German Soviet player was able to attack, that will determine who wins and who loses the game. White Eagle Defiant is a really strong game. I like it quite a bit. I think I like it more than Brave Little Belgium, which is a game that I really liked a lot. And definitely you can see how the designs overlap in many respects. Possibly it's just because of the theme that is more interesting to me. I just have more interest in World War II than the Great War. But also, I like just the flow of the game, the different action. It is a very dynamic game because it is all over the place without feeling chaotic. It starts already with a situation where you don't really have a strict, a clearly defined front. Yes, the Germans are on one side and on top, and the Polish forces are in the center of the board. But from there, you can go in so many different directions because the Germans can push in different directions. By doing so, they may leave certain areas in the north open for the Polish player to take control of some cities, to get some of those cities back, to attack 2 forts that the Germans have in the north, and that would score points for the Polish player if conquered. True, another interesting element is you do not have rules for supply lines. So you may fear that again it gets too chaotic, but simply the point-to-point map and the fact that you want to expand your controlled areas but also retain some. In truth, that gives you a lot of freedom, but haven't seen things that look, say, too weird, too crazy. And ultimately, being in a circle is still bad, even if you don't have supply rules, because you have nowhere to retreat, and that's never, ever good. So, on one hand, I was surprised that there were no rules for supplies, but then functionally, in essence, in actuality, gameplay turned out to be streamlined and made simpler by that, but did not feel, to go against history. So it's pretty interesting because you have a situation that we think of historically as, pre-written. There was only one way that this could go. And the Polish player is still going to take out the punishment, mind you. And when you think you've taken enough, then the Soviets come in. And so you're going to take more. And it really gets to the point where you're hanging by a thread, which is good enough if you're hanging by a thread a little bit better than your circle counterpart did. So it's one of these games that to me is remarkable because it takes an unequal situation, turns it into, yes, an unequal confrontation. The Polish side is going to take a lot of punishment. and yet creates balance so that while the Polish forces will tend to be destroyed or almost entirely destroyed or in any case severely punished most of the time, the Soviet player actually has a real chance to win it by simply presenting a big bill to the other side, by slowing down the other side, by making them pay a high cost for their advantages. And it's fascinating to me. You had the sense of mounting dread that comes from the fact that both sides have very powerful, effective force at the beginning, the cavalry and those tanks, but also very fragile, very brittle. The Polish ones more fragile, more brittle than the German ones. But still, those German tanks, at the very least, will have to slow down and refit from time to time. Will have to recover, otherwise they will disappear almost as fast as the Polish cavalry. And at that point, well, then you're really stuck also. So you have an interesting situation because you have action that goes all over the map with fronts or mini fronts or partial fronts that form, that fall apart, that shift, with actual opportunities for counterattack from the Polish player, which is not something that I necessarily expect with a game with this topic, but it feels very welcome because it broadens the range of possible actions that occur on the map. The entrance of the Soviet players, again, is like the second or the third act of a horror movie, depending on which side you are. And so that also contributes to give the game an architecture. It's not like every time we're going to do the same thing over and over again. You definitely see the different acts of this tragedy from both sides having these powerful, swift weapons that, however, get worn out and disappear quickly. Then you have the entrance of the Soviets. So you really have different phases of the game that feel differently, they present you with different situations. And yet everything is also very simple. This is definitely an entryway war game. If this is the first time you're gonna play a war game, I think you're gonna be fine. I don't think you're gonna be overwhelmed. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy with this game. The production is, desktop quality. It's a small company, which looks nice enough. Those wooden counters do look nice. The paper map, again, looks, doesn't look super exciting from the point of view of production values, but is perfectly functional. It works very well. Everything works well in terms of game design. This is a fun game that gives you a strong sense of history, yet allows you to explore a lot of different what ifs, a lot of alternative scenarios. And with a single map, with a single scenario, yet you can explore so many different situations by pushing and holding different parts of the map that really allows you to explore a lot of different situations. I love the system. I liked in the previous game. I think I like this one better. I love the system, the gameplay, the flow of the action, and the theme. So, and I also like the level of difficulty, which is low. I'm at a point in life where a simple war game is just what I need. I'm getting older, grumpier, busier. I got 2 kids at home that I'm homeschooling, and that was not my vocation in life, to homeschool kids on top of doing my job, and then I play war games by myself late at night. This is the kind of war game that I need. Simple, sweet, simple. I said it twice on purpose because it's very important, but fun.